Hello, I'm Joe Ewins, and this is the Vixio Gambling Compliance podcast. I hope you're doing very well. Before we get into the topic for this episode, as we get close to our 100th episode, we're making a few improvements to the show. Namely, we're adding video to the podcast, which means that some of you are looking at me right now. Hello to you, Trailblazers. And if you'd also prefer to watch as well as listen to the show, you can find it on YouTube, Vimeo, and our website, Vixio.com. Don't worry, audio files, the audio version of the podcast will remain in its usual place in your podcast feeds and on our website from now until time immemorial. So, on to this week's topic. The UK gambling industry's relationship with affiliate marketing has been complex over the years. In many ways, the story has moved on from the days of a major regulatory crackdown and stories of mass cancellations of contracts to a more stable environment. But there are tensions and complications created by outsourcing marketing to a third party on both sides of the equation. That tension is well laid out in a new UK marketing compliance report compiled by Rightlander, a company that provides software that monitors affiliate compliance. Among its key findings are that there were a staggering 1.32 million marketing regulatory infractions in the UK in 2023, more than any other single market. To discuss the report and the wider state of gambling marketing, our associate editor Harrison Sayers sat down for a chat with Rightlander's Chief Strategy Officer Serafina Wald-Gabriel to discuss all things affiliates.
Thanks for that introduction, Joe. Today I am joined by Serafina, the Chief Strategy Officer at Rightlander, who will be discussing the UK Marketing Compliance Report. Could you delve into a bit about what the report is and what it covers for our listeners?
Thank you very much, Harrison. It's great to be here. So we recently released a report looking at the overall marketing infractions that our technology scans and collects. And we use data from 2023. So a couple of months ago, we did one on EU, the top regulated markets, and then we followed it up with the UK one. The reason we separated the UK from the EU one was, one, purely because the UK markets got quite a few additional scans that we're always looking for and things that we monitor because the regulators got additional nuances as part of the marketing. And secondly, it's just a more established, much bigger market, very mature when it comes to affiliate marketing. So there's just a lot more volume. And for that reason, the marketing infractions that you see in the UK compared to the rest of the continent is always going to be much higher from our data.
And before we kind of delve into the data itself, could you kind of just explain a little bit more about what exactly a marketing infraction is?
Sure. So it's basically anything that contravenes against the regulations. So, every market has got its specific rules of what you can and can't advertise, what language you can use, what you can't use. So it can vary from anything that says, gaming is life-changing and, you can get rich quick, to anything that's, risky or saying there's no risk in placing a bet. It's risk-free in essence. And then things like time-sensitive calls to action. So something that's encouraging people to play or to bet, and which can obviously lead to unintended consequences. So things like that are basically what we go for. And on the other spectrum, you've got a lot of, bad actors who deliberately target self-excluded customers and want to encourage them. And so they're telling them, hey, you can't play here because you're self-excluded, but you can go and play in these unregulated environments. So it's a whole range basically, and it's tailored to each market. It's tailored to what our customers specifically looking for.
So it's fair to say you're monitoring and reporting on a wide range of different marketing infractions then?
Yes. So we monitor what our clients want us to monitor. There's obviously the rules that come down from the regulator, and then there is the additional protection, because as you know, whenever there is an infraction, it's always the brands that get the fines, not not the third-party marketer, be it your affiliates or your influencers. It's always the brand that's responsible. So if they're being held accountable, then obviously some of them really want to avoid any chance of that happening or being fined. So they ask us to monitor, in addition to what the regulator says, things like, bonuses, incentives, and the language around those, and, making sure that they're not going beyond what they should be.
So obviously we've touched on the wide range. What are the kind of most common ones that you see occurring? Do you, for instance, see pressing people for time as something that's very frequent, or targeting self-excluded players?
I would say, from both our UK study and our EU study, the ones that came up more commonly across different markets were, yes, the use of risky language, as we call it, and time-sensitive calls to action. So things that are encouraging people to bet or make a reckless behavior because they just want to get that money through the door. We noticed a lot of that coming up more than any others. And risky words, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, can range, is a quite vast category, because there's risky words that say, get rich quick, or there's, it's risk-free to place a bet. You have nothing to lose, spend £10 and you could be a millionaire. Any of those type of languages that infer there's no risk in spending that money is pretty much considered to be a risky language in the campaigns.
And when you're seeing the kind of risky language or whatever infractions it might be, are they skewed towards licensed operators? Are you only monitoring for licensed operators, or is this encompassing both licensed and unlicensed operators in those markets that you're monitoring?
Our customers are mainly licensed operators working in regulated markets, hence why they're monitoring, because they want to have more control of their partners and make sure that they're being promoted in the right places, have more visibility, and also transparency. So it's generally, they're in a regulated market, and they want to make sure that their affiliates or their third-party marketers are all following the rules.
So the ad infractions all from licensed operators then, promoting that? Okay.
Yeah.
When we kind of look into the different jurisdictions in the report, could you touch on a bit about what the key jurisdictions were that you're looking into? You've obviously mentioned the UK. Were there other kind of standout jurisdictions, and the kind of reasoning behind why certain places might see more infractions than others?
Yes, so we looked in the EU report, we pretty much looked at across the spectrum, and there were, in certain categories, we saw countries had worse infractions than the UK. For example, the presence of unlicensed operators being advertised on affiliate sites. The countries that had the most strict out ban, like Spain, like Italy, even we saw the numbers there were so much higher than the UK. UK came fourth, for example, out of the top 10 ones. So, and then you've got things like, targeting self-excluded customers, or the responsible gaming signals, like putting out 18 plus on the campaigns. Obviously, those, UK was quite high, more than any others. But then again, the other two big ones, like I mentioned earlier, the life-changing terms and using risky language, that was across the board. It was just literally about volume. But nearly all the countries had high infractions in those categories.
So one of the things that we've touched on here is obviously the fact that there were 1.32 million, if I'm not correct, of the ad infractions in the UK. And
Correct.
I know that we've touched on the fact that, perhaps your clients or affiliates are also a bit more perhaps mature in the market in the UK. Are there other reasons that you might suspect that the UK infractions were reported on higher, or is this something that you were surprised by? Or
we were surprised by the amount of infractions. We weren't surprised about the size of it, only because we do a lot more scanning and monitoring in the UK than any other market. But in comparison, we also monitor in Ontario, in Canada. And obviously, Ontario has got some very strict regulations around things like bonuses. So you can't have any bonuses or incentives. And although it's still a very young market, I mean, it's only been regulated for the last 2 years, their numbers were quite high when you compared them. So it's not a fair comparison because it's not as mature. You don't have as many affiliates and operators operating in the market. However, you could see that the numbers are growing in a quite, in a high pace, that it's just a matter of how many more operators and how many more affiliates enter the marketplace to expand it. Whereas UK, as I mentioned, because it's such a regulated market and it's heavily enforced, the regulations, and also on top of that, it's just a mature market, so you've got a lot more activity within the market than others. So that's why it's a lot higher, not because they're all of, they don't all have the same amount of activity.
Okay, so there could be a whole host of kind of things at play here, whether it be the size of the market, perhaps the leniency of the regulations, or like you said, perhaps a newly licensed market with a lot of interest and excitement and buzz to capture new consumers or things.
Exactly.
So I think it's quite clear then, even just from that, there's a lot that regulators should be on the lookout for. But what could operators take away from these findings? What can an operator look at and see, okay, there's X amount of infractions in this area. What should an operator be taking away from these insights?
I think our main goal is to say that, responsible gaming starts with responsible marketing. That's really our message. And what we aim to do is give operators the insights into what's out there in terms of, what are the infractions that we're finding. The one thing to say is when our system finds these infractions and, the operators take action. So the more we monitor, the more actions are taken down. We can't prevent all bad actors. It's just not, a utopia that will never be achieved easily. However, I think the fact that there is a proactive action to it rather than a reactive one where, just because a regulator tells you have to do this, you're doing it. That's what we're trying to avoid. We want to encourage everyone to be proactive about it, make sure that they know how they're being promoted, where they're being promoted, and take that. So if we can help provide insights on what's out there, then I think that's the first step to encouraging brands to be more proactive on how their relationship with their marketing partners.
And I know we've touched on a little bit about regulation and how perhaps it's quite complex without like evidence-based research to make an assumption about how X policy is affecting marketing infractions. But were there any indications of a market where the regulations have clearly been working very well, or market players were very much compliant with the advertising regulations? Or is this something, like you said, that is just quite a global problem that operators need to be aware of?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, there are markets like the Netherlands, Sweden, where they're very proactive in terms of taking action, and we see less and less and less infractions there. I mean, other markets, yes, it varies hugely. Some are more tolerant than others. Some are more lenient, or they just don't enforce. They've got the rules in place, but the enforcing part is not there. So we can see some correlation between the ones who are really active with their enforcements versus those who are not. In the same way, you can, again, there are assumptions here, but you can see that when the regulator goes the other spectrum, banning all advertising, then you tend to see an unintended consequence of that, which is a higher number of unregulated brands being advertised to that market. So, I can't say 100%, but I can tell you that, where this regulation is very strict, you have other unintended consequences that come up from it.
Well, would you say, I mean, maybe it's a bit of a stretch, but would you say it's a fair assumption to make that, for instance, perhaps certain infractions like targeting excluded players might be more down to unlicensed operators marketing, and then perhaps things like risk-free might be not more likely to be with a licensed operator, but one of the more frequent things that you might see a difference between a licensed and unlicensed operator perhaps being to blame for different marketing infractions?
Yes, 100%. I mean, targeting, self-excluded is really a gateway for unregulated brands being advertised. And therefore you've got, affiliates. There's always the debate, should we, regulate all marketing partners? How are you going to regulate Google, right? How are you going to regulate Facebook? Yes, there are ways to do it, but is there a will to do it? We're not calling for that, but what we're saying is, if you find that those platforms are used predominantly for targeting, for example, self-excluded players, then the regulator probably needs to do something about that. And so, yes, there is 100% correlation with, how regulated brands behave versus non-regulated brands, because obviously the rules are very different.
I find a lot of the points you make there very interesting. It's definitely a case of, I guess, for instance, social media has a role as well to play in that sense then, if you're saying, or maybe not social media, but would you just say advertising platforms in general have somewhat of a role to be playing as well then?
100%, because when you think of affiliates in the traditional sense, an affiliate is a marketing partner. It's an engine. So affiliates could advertise you on your website. They could be running display ads or paid search or ads on social media. So there are various platforms that those campaigns are being displayed on. And so it's not only the individual affiliate that you've got to look at, but you've got to look at the whole ecosystem, because everyone has a role to play. If we talk about RG, it's not, RG is not just a regulator or an operator's responsibility or an affiliate's responsibility. It's the whole ecosystem. So we've got to, that's why we say responsible gaming starts with responsible marketing. And if you give, if you're a conduit for the irresponsible part of it, then the outcome becomes the negative effects that we all see and we all try to crack down on.
Well, I feel bad asking this after you just made it quite clear that everyone has their part to play. But I know we've touched on kind of a message that operators could take away from these insights. What kind of insights do you think a regulator could take away, or an advertising watchdog, as it were? Not even necessarily gambling regulator, just authorities with some hand in their pie here. What kind of tips would you give them, or insights?
Again, it's all about be proactive. If they are encouraging their licensees or license holders to be proactive on how they enforce responsible marketing, then I think it's going to be a win-win outcome. The next phase to our study is going to be a comparison of our 2023 versus 2024 reports, because in an ideal world, what we're trying to advocate here is to say, the more you're aware of the infractions that are out there and you take action against them, the numbers should come down, because we can't stop the bad actors from putting campaigns up there. But what we can do is find it and try to get it down. So that's the message to the regulator is, communicate with your licensee holders, have that open dialogue. So there's no, it's not just about a fear of being fined that makes you react, but you want to be more proactive to do the right thing and make sure that you've got the responsible messaging that's being displayed out there.
And I'm assuming you mean proactive in all sorts of levels, whether that's reporting on an advert that breaches the rules, or if you see a promotion for unlicensed, or like you said, self-excluded players, any of those things kind of in the ecosystem, whether it's to report it or deplatform it. I'm guessing you're saying all along that system is needed,
Correct.
right?
Correct. Because the reality is, I mean, Harrison, I've been in affiliate marketing for 20 years now. And most affiliates want to do the right thing. Most affiliates play by the rules. So, I mean, but the goalpost is constantly changing. And so it becomes very easy to fall off and say, oh no, I've got the wrong campaign up, or I've got an outdated promotion still on my pages and I'm not even aware of it. So when I say proactive, it's, make sure there is a proactive dialogue happening on all sides, so that if you change something, then everyone else needs to be aware of it, and that change can't be done in isolation. Otherwise, even good partners can fall foul of their regulations, and then you have problems. So yes, there are tools out there. There's so many data insights available. I mean, your platform is a great one for sharing a lot of data insights. I mean, I read Vixio religiously because there's so much information that comes from you. And so use that data. It's not just there for no reason, but, use it and take action from it, and use it to help you shape what type of regulatory frameworks you put out there. But really, if we all monitor and we all take action, then the regulator in theory will have less to do. And that's the goal, right?
I think so. I think that's a good message. Better evidence gathering, better collaboration, all of those things I think are very key points for the industry addressing any issue really, especially in, like you said, such a large ecosystem that encompasses advertisers, operators, suppliers, regulators, it does always take a collaborative effort.
Exactly. And it's becoming more challenging with different types of marketing platforms out there now. You've got influencers, you've got, celebrities that are part of it now. And it's a constant cat and mouse chase. So it's not as easy as just monitoring one thing or one platform. You're across such a large, vast, and then you've got video as well now. So we've got a lot to do. That's what our reporting and our data shows us, is we've got a lot of fighting to do.
I mean, if I could be cheeky, I'm definitely interested to know, when it comes to things like influencers, when did you guys start monitoring that? That excites me. It's interesting to know that it's I mean, clearly the last few years influencers have become key, whether they're being banned or being allowed to be used. How important is the use of influencers right now for affiliate marketing?
Influencers to us are another form of a third-party marketer. So they may be categorized separately from your traditional affiliate, purely because they're more closer to the brand versus an affiliate who is more seen as an advertising channel. But the same rules apply to an influencer. There are things that they can say and can't say. And you tend to see quite a lot, not only in the gaming industry, but also in other industries, where influencer marketing is becoming heavily scrutinized and monitored more aggressively now because of the influential aspect of it. And also they appeal to vast age groups as well. And that's in itself is also one of the challenges you've got with influencer marketing. But I know that I was reading a report in Google ad campaigns, and they said they took down something like 5 billion ads in 2023. So it goes to show you, it's not just influencers, but in general, it's the number of ads that broke or were contrary to our advertising regulations.
And that's just on one platform.
And that's just one platform.
It definitely is a big uphill task, I think. But like you said, collaboration definitely will make it a lot easier.
Correct. That's right.
I think that's all the questions I had for you today, unless there's anything else you'd like to add on or any message for our listeners.
No, that's brilliant. I think, the message is really, we have to collaborate, we have to work together, we have to be proactive to get that transparency, so we know what kind of marketing is being pushed out there. And ultimately, consumer protection is at the forefront of it all. So the best way to try and promote consumers is to make sure that the campaigns targeting them are as accurate and responsible as possible. So I think that's really the key message here is we probably all are in the same team when we're trying to fight the bad actors in the industry, so we can have a nice sustainable and successful environment. And that's what we all do, and we all strive to do and play our little part in it.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And I also just wanted to say a big thank you for joining us today and sharing your insights. It's been really enjoyable.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the wonderful dialogue.
Thanks very much to Harrison and Seraphine for that engaging conversation. I hope you've enjoyed our very first video episode, those of you that watched it. Stay tuned for more in the future, including the next episode, which will be excerpts from our UK White Paper webinar featuring the Gambling Commission and DCMS. That's taking place at 11 a.m. UK time on July 23rd. So if you're very quick, you may still have time to register for that, but no worries. If not, you'll be able to catch up via the pod. That's it for this week. Thank you very much for listening and watching. Goodbye. The Gambling Compliance podcast is hosted by Joe Ewens. In this episode, Harrison Sayers was speaking to Serafina Wald Gabriel. The producer is Jack Halliday.